It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Our long national nightmare has ended. No more Twitter refreshes. No more Scott Morris telling his puppet to name a random team. It's over. Peter Jefferson Aloysius Martinez Alonso is back. Not forever, but he's back on a 2-year contract. And before we get started, I want you all to thank the Barclays Center and the Brooklyn Nets, because for whatever reason, I can't explain it. When I go to a Nets game, something big happens with the New York Mets. We had a bad incident 2 years ago when I was sitting there on a Friday night watching the Nets destroy the Toronto Raptors, and I got the passing bomb that Jacob deGrom was leaving us to sign with the Texas Rangers. And on this night, Thursday or Wednesday, whatever day it is, I don't even know, I was watching the Washington Wizards against the Nets. I got problems, bro. I tell you that. I got major problems. And as I was in my car driving back from that monstrosity of a basketball game, my phone blew up. And as soon as I saw, you got the Apple CarPlay, so you see that you have like 9 messages with all these random people, I knew something big happened. And I wasn't sure what it was. And I was very, very nervous. I thought it would have something to do with Pete Alonso because we're getting down to nut crunching time. And so I didn't know what to do. I'm driving down the BQE. Don't really want to look at my phone, but I know something big happened. And luckily, the first message I saw was from the Mets text chat. And it wasn't a tweet from Jeff Passan or a tweet from Andy Martino. It simply said, "Let's go." And when I saw those beautiful words out of my good friend Ryan, also known as Adam Eaton, I said, "Let's go." Oh, I know what this is. Yes, Pete Alonso is back. And if you're mocking me for being too excited about that, as a Met fan, you're like, "Oh, you're so excited about Pete Alonso. He sucks. He blows. He had a terrible year. He hits home runs when they're up 8-0. Realize this, and I know we've been screaming about this for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. Realize this, and we'll get into all the details of this, the future, the money, all that kind of crap. Realize this. The New York Mets are a better baseball team in 2025 with Pete Alonso in the lineup versus not in the lineup. If you disagree with that, if you argue that, then either you're a hater or you're an idiot. I don't know which one. Now, I get baseball's crazy. Crazy stuff can happen, right? But knowing what we know about Pete, even the decline of the last 3 years, and knowing what we don't know about Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio and every young player that was going to get an opportunity. And by the way, they're still going to get an opportunity. They'll still have a chance to be successful. If they hit, they'll play. Ask Mark Vientos. If you hit, they will find a way to play you. The New York Mets are a better team with Pete Alonso here. That's the most important thing. Because I think when I thought or envisioned the day of Pete Alonso signing or Pete Alonso extending, let's say 2 years ago, I envisioned it a little bit differently. I envisioned saying, "Oh, Pete's going to be a Met for life. Pete's going to be here forever." Obviously, this contract does not tell us that. If anything, this contract tells us the opposite, that there's a really good chance a year from now, Pete Alonso's on a different team. And what I say to that is, we'll have that discussion a year from now. We'll have that debate a year from now. There may be very different circumstances a year from now. So this is not a Pete Alonso is going to be a Met for life. Pete Alonso is going to hit 500 home runs as a New York Met. He's going to somehow get in the Hall of Fame and wear a Met hat. It's none of that. This is simply my excitement, and what should be your excitement and any Met fan's excitement should be simply, hey, the most reliable slugger in baseball, despite his decline over the last few years, he has been one of the most reliable sluggers in baseball. He's back. He's back on the 2025 New York Mets. And the New York Mets have a better chance to succeed in 2025 with Pete Alonso here versus not here. So this moment, whether you're consuming this live on a Wednesday night or downloaded the podcast, and we appreciate you downloading, subscribing, whatever, the Rico Brogna, it's a good day. It's not a bad day. I don't even think it's a debatable day. I don't think it's we shouldn't have done this day. And what's so funny is right before this news came out, I told you I'm driving home from a Brooklyn Nets game and I'm doing the voice text. And Pete Hoffman, the fine producer of the Rico Brogna, also the fine producer of BT and Sal, when he shows up to work, of course, he texted me a really weird message. And it was simply, hey, Evan, what's the most money you'd offer to Pete Alonso? All right, that was his question. And I gave him an answer, and I swear to God, I mean, Pete could check this on the timestamp. I think this conversation happened like 2 minutes before he signed. Is that fair to say, Hoff, that this exchange we had via my voice chat driving on the BQE and your text was literally like minutes before Jeff Passan dropped the bomb? Is that fair?
Yeah, there was minutes. I don't know the exact time, but yeah, there was minutes there for sure.
And it was weird. I don't know why you were asking me that in that moment. Like, I don't know what the reason was, because your question was, Evan, what's the most money you'd offer Pete Alonso? Why did you ask me that? And then we'll get into what this all means. Go ahead.
Because I was hearing things that there was countering going on from both sides.
Right.
And I think that there was one last counter, and I understood what the finances were.
Yep.
And I just didn't think that that was feasible. Now it's not what we saw.
Okay.
It's not what we saw. But what I was hearing was something a little bit higher than what he signed for, but it was a 2-year deal. And I was like, this is never gonna get done.
So my point to you, Pete, in that text exchange, and my point I think I've made very clear on the Rico was I wasn't angry with the New York Mets for not just giving Pete Alonso whatever he wants. That'd be stupid. You have to do smart business. And when you allow a guy to get to free agency, you're telling that player, show me your best offer. When you get that best offer, let us know, especially if you want to come back. And Pete clearly wanted to come back. I think that's been relatively obvious throughout this process. Let us know what your best offer is, and then we'll have a chance to match it or beat it. And until that happened, until there was an offer presented to the New York Mets, my attitude, our argument the other day on the Rico was, why am I just giving in? Why am I negotiating against myself? But what I warned you, and I warned anyone who listened, was the day he leaves, the day he's on a different team, there's a really good chance I'm going to turn the mic on and say, how come the Mets didn't match that? How come the Mets let Pete Alonso leave for that amount of money? So when you ask me, where's the most you could go? My answer was $1 more than his best offer. Like, I was always going to be annoyed if Pete was gone. But I wasn't willing to get as emotional as I am. I understand I'm an emotional guy, but I wasn't willing to negotiate against myself. I was willing to say, you know what? Until he gets that better offer from Toronto, Anaheim, or who knows, until he gets the better offer, I don't need the Mets to overbid themselves. Now, ultimately, the Mets gave him $30 million. $30 million in year one. That is an opt-out year. He opts out. He's a free agent. It's a 1-year, $30 million contract, which is pretty effing good. It's the most money ever given to a first baseman. If he opts in, it goes down to $24 million. Now, this is the way it sounds to me. If there was no offer from the Toronto Blue Jays or no offer from the Angels that the Mets needed to match, it sounded like Steve Cohen basically saying, you know what? I'm just going to get this done. I'm going to make the fans happy. I'm going to bring Pete Alonso back, and I'm just going to do something that probably not the best business in terms of negotiating against myself, but I want this done. I want this done because I don't want this leaking into the beginning of spring training, which is not good for anybody. It's not good for Pete, and it's not good for his teammates. You think his teammates need to stand there and answer 150 questions about why he isn't there? So if Alonso signed with Toronto at $31 million a year, 1 year, let's say the same contract, except $31 million in year one, I'd have turned this mic on, and I'm sure many would have disagreed, and I would have said the Mets should have offered 32, or the Mets should have matched it. That's always been my opinion on this. Don't negotiate against yourselves, but don't let yourself get outbid. Because if you have him on a short-term deal, even if people out there who are skeptical of Alonso are right that he's on the decline, fine. It's a 2-year goddamn contract. Okay? What's the worst that can happen? He sucks for 2 years? Okay. Then he's gone. You never have to worry about him again. it's a sunk cost, but it's not as sunk as a 5-year contract. So when you ask me that, it was always just make sure you're the highest bidder. Now, unless there was an offer we didn't hear about, it sounds like Steve Cohen actually listened to what Pete Hoffman wanted and basically said, all right, I'll negotiate against myself. Let me just get this done. And I'm going to give you $30 million. Because, Pete, we heard of no other offer that was anywhere close to what the Mets ultimately gave him.
That's fine. And I won't disagree that maybe Steve Cohen had to sit there and say, the finance-wise, we're going to have to, go against nobody and just kind of create numbers out of our ass, and we don't like this. But if you want to go by the fact that originally he was asking for a long-term deal, 7-8-year deal, and they came down to 5 or 4, 3, and now eventually 2. I mean, let's be serious. Who came down more? I mean, if you're going to look at it that way.
Well, no. I don't think that's the way you should look at negotiations, because what if I go into the architect's office at WFAN? My contract's going to run out, I think, at the end of the year. No, I know it runs out at the end of the year. And I go in there and I say to the architect, I want $100 million. And he's like, no, I'm going to offer you the exact same amount of money you make now. Do I then get him to go up to $10 million? Because, well, I'm actually moving more than you because I asked. I mean, you can't do it that way. Like, it's not about anyone moving. It's about the market. That's what this is always about. And if you look at what the Mets offered Pete Alonso reportedly, and I had heard that that's what they offered him, so I could say it happened. It's confirmed, really, of the 3 years, $70 million. And a lot of it was deferred. I did hear that. They ended up offering him about, on average, $23 million a year, which is the same as what they offered him on that long-term contract 2 years ago. Well, ultimately, they ended up giving him 2 options, that 3-year, $71 million deal or a 2-year, $54 million deal in which he gets 30 in year 1. So I'm not sure what the year 1 money was in the 3-year, $71 million offer, but it wasn't 30. It was probably 25. So the Mets moved. And I don't know if they needed to move. Like, I question if there were no other offers and Steve Cohen said, no, I'm just going to be a dick about this. I'm going to stick on the 3 years, 71. And what are you going to do about it? I think this probably just drags out longer. And ultimately, I think what may have caused Steve Cohen to pay this extra money was to just get it done. Because when you are trying to win, and this team is trying to win, and we're going to have many a podcast breaking down how good they are, how good we think they are, projections, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing we could agree on is they are trying to win. When you are trying to win, you do not want to put avenues in front of you that make it more difficult. Pete Alonso not being there for the start of spring training makes things more difficult. Having Mark Vientos or Brett Beatty work out at positions that they're probably not going to play a lot of, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but it's not ideal. It's not. Having Pete Alonso miss weeks of spring training, not ideal. Having Brandon Nimmo and every other Met, having Juan Soto upon his first year joining the Mets, have to answer 150 questions about Pete Alonso is not ideal. So I think Cohen probably said, I could just drag this thing out further, but why am I going to do that when I know it's bad for us? I want to get this done. So let me say this to Steve Cohen. And I think I've said this before to Steve Cohen, but I'll say it again. And I'm sure he's an avid listener to the Rico Brogna. Steve, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for getting it done. Thank you for not letting this drag into late February. Thank you, if it was, throwing a few extra $1 million in there so it wouldn't drag into late February. Thank you. Thank you for being honest a few weeks ago at Amazing Day. Thank you for not completely closing the door on Pete Alonso. Thank you for bringing him back. And thank you for lineup-wise, because I know we could have different arguments about the rotation and the bullpen. Lineup-wise, I think putting together the dream scenario when we went into the offseason. I want you guys to think about that. Remember November 1st. The Yankees just blew the World. Well, they blew Game 5. I wouldn't say they blew the World. They blew the World Series. They blew the whole thing. Game 1, they blew. That's fine. The Yankees have blown the World Series. Now it's the offseason. Juan Soto was the priority, of course, I think for everybody. And then bringing Pete Alonso back would have been like the added, can you bring them both back? And I remember even admitting, you know what? If you can get Juan Soto, if you can't bring back Pete Alonso, I understand it. If I had to pick between the two, as much as this sounds disloyal, I'm going to pick Juan Soto. But then you get Juan Soto. Alonso's market dies. I mean, it drops dead. And you start to say, can we bring Pete back too? But if I told you on November 1st, they're getting Soto, we're getting Soto, and we're keeping Pete Alonso and everything else we're going to run back. You know, Vientos will be here. Even McNeil will be here. Obviously, Lindor is going to be here. We're going to go like kind of platoonish / open up the young spot in center field. Marte will just move to DH. We're not even going to dump his contract, and I hope they don't. We'll bring back Jesse Winker. We're going to bring everybody back but OMG. We would have been like, you kid, let's go. We would have been like this. Hold on. I'm going to make a sound effect, but I can't even do it. I was going to do it like you're really excited and the thing hits the table. You know what I mean?
The rim shot?
Nah, I was trying to make a very inappropriate joke, but it didn't work, so we all moved on.
We all failed.
We would have been very excited. We would have said, really? Really? Juan Soto and Pete Alonso? Let's effing go. And now, this lineup, and we're going to do a podcast on it. I'm not getting into it today. I'm not going to argue who should bat second. I've been waiting for it, though. I've been so excited, but we got plenty of them. You've got a core for this season of Francisco Lindor, who turned into one of the best leadoff hitters in baseball last year. Juan Soto, who, do we have to waste our time using words to describe Juan Soto? We all know the deal. Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, who became a star last year, and Hoff's favorite guy, Brandon Nimmo. That's your 5. So however you want to line them up, that's your 5. And Starling Marte, potentially a DH, and Francisco Alvarez. And oh, by the way, Jeff McNeil, who, as much as we're down on him, did win a batting title 2 years ago. This lineup is very deep. And so as you picture this lineup, I'm not trying to spike the football on your faces because I think most people agreed, but we did have some arguments about Pete Alonso. How can you seriously think this isn't the best case scenario? How can you not? Instead of us trying to figure out, well, all right, Brett Beatty's going to get a lot of time. Ronnie Mauricio's coming off a torn ACL. And look, both of those guys are going to get a chance. Second base is not a birthright for Jeff McNeil. He'll get a chance to be that second baseman. If he's hitting 225 in May, different conversation. DH, same thing. Marte's gone at the end of the year. If he doesn't hit, if he's on the injured list, DH could potentially open up. What if Brandon Nimmo needs plenty of off days? Jesse Winker's in the outfield, another DH spot opening up. There are going to be opportunities for Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Beatty. I screamed this last year about Vientos and Beatty when I wanted a DH, and they obviously added JD. I said, don't worry, guys. There'll be opportunities for these young players. You don't know where those opportunities are going to come from, but if you hit, you'll play. And what happened? Mark Vientos got the 11:59 p.m. surprise of JD Martinez being signed, and he was pissed. That's what I've heard. He was like, you got to be effing kidding me. And you know what Mark Vientos did with that anger? He went to AAA and he raked. And you know what he did with that anger? He came up to the major leagues briefly and he raked. Then he went back to the minor leagues and he raked again. Then he came back up and he raked. And before you know it, he's hitting a freaking game-tying home run against the Phillies in the divisional series. If Brett Beatty's got stones, that's what he does. This is not the end of the line for Brett Beatty. It's just a new opportunity to rake the way Vientos did. So I don't want to hear any gobbledygook about how these young guys are buried. It's BS. It's not true. You hit, you will play. There are opportunities. But the most reliable slugger is back, and his goddamn name is Pete Alonso. What, baby?
I hate to move a little forward, not too forward.
Let's move forward.
But here's the thing, right? You just brought in a prolific hitter, power hitter in Pete Alonso. And he's here for 2 years. That may Beatty for really having any sort of impact. Do you think now he's more trade bait for a pitcher?
I don't know. Look, I'm open to any kind of trade. I don't think this changes anything, though. Like, if Brett Beatty was going to get them Dylan Cease, they would have made the trade last week. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think it changes that. What I do think is that Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio, specifically them, have less pressure on them. Like, and less pressure on us to rely on them playing every single day. I think the beauty of Brett Beatty, and look, as far as the trade bait question is concerned, I don't think it changes his value. And I think if his value was going to present the Mets with an opportunity to get a frontline starting pitcher, I think you pull the trigger either way. So I don't think it changes. Well, we can't trade Brett Beatty in a package for Dylan Cease because we may lose Pete Alonso. I don't think necessarily that would change it. But I do think that Brett Beatty's ability to play second base, his ability to play third base, because listen, Pete's been a reliable player, but what if he gets hurt? You know, what if this is the year he misses time on the injured list? You've got a lot of avenues to play. But I do want to say this about Pete. Pete Alonso had a very disappointing year last year in the regular season. And one of the things that has been said about Pete, and I totally get it because I've gotten a lot of emails about it. I know Sal was saying it the other day. I talked to him about this. Well, how did he perform under the pressure of a prove yourself contract? He didn't. And by the way, no arguing that. There's no arguing that. In a prove-it year deal, his free agent year, Pete Alonso statistically had one of the worst years of his career. So is it declining? Because I don't think all guys decline at 30, but he is getting a little bit older. Is he declining because of age and skill, or was it just, hey, he put a lot of pressure on himself and that led to a bad season, or for him, a disappointing season? Let's take the pressure for a second. If you believe it was the pressure, don't you feel a little bit better about the fact that he then performed in a pressurized spot known as the postseason? Does it like a little bit? Like, if you think the 1 year and the fighting for money and the I got to have a big contract year really got to him, if that really caused him to not have this clutch season, then how do you explain hitting arguably the clutchest home run in the history of the franchise? How do you explain that? And then following it up by hitting huge home runs in the division series and the LCS. I'm not telling you that a couple of weeks of being hot should give you confidence. But what I am saying is if you really believe pressure got to him, don't you think playing in a pressurized environment and doing it at a high level should also make you say that maybe pressure didn't get to him? And let's say the pressure does get to him. This is what I love about this contract. I personally, as a Met fan, love this contract more than the 3-year deal. I really do. Because Pete Alonso's back for 1 year. Well, let's just be honest about this. If Pete Alonso puts up the exact same stats as last year, right? Same numbers, 34 home runs, 785 OPS. I can't tell you if it's more clutch or not. Let's just say overall the stats are the same. He opts out. I think he opts out because I think Pete Alonso is going to say, I could do better than 1 year's $24 million. 1 year, $24 million. I think he's also going to say, no QO on me. No qualifying offer. Oh, no qualifying offer. I'll do better. So Pete Alonso signed a 1-year contract. That's the way I look at it. He signed a 1-year contract. And our discussions on Pete's thoughts, that's for next year. Because I don't know where we're going to be. I don't know who's going to be available. Is Vlad Guerrero available? I don't know. Is Juan Soto horrendous in right field to where we're saying, you know what, let's just move Juan to first base? Did Ronnie Mauricio come up in the middle of June and tear it up? There are so many things that are going to happen between now and next November that I'll tell you right now, I'm not beating the drum on an extension for Pete Alonso. I'm beating the drum on let's play this season out. We'll see what happens. I think it is unlikely Pete will be back after that. I think this is probably a 1-year marriage. And am I okay with that as a Met fan? Even though I'm big on the career Met, forever Met. Beningo has said it brilliantly. Home runs, breaking the all-time home run record, which he will this year. Oh, I mean, he better this year. The Mets home run record, that is, on Darryl Strawberry. Like, I'd love for him to be a career Met, but I admit it's unlikely. This contract makes it unlikely. This free agency makes it unlikely. The fact that next year in free agency, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is available, Kyle Tucker is available, and like I said, even the young players we're talking about, if someone is Mark Vientos this year, if somebody who maybe we're not even thinking about bursts onto the scene, does that make us look at first base and say, we don't need Pete Alonso? And by the way, let's say Pete has a monster year. Let's say Pete goes out there and puts up, numbers that are representative of maybe his rookie season. What if he hits 48 home runs and has a 900 OPS? Maybe he benefits from being in a really, really loaded lineup. I would also tell you it's likely he's not back because he could potentially turn that into a 5-year contract, which I think the early returns on David Stearns tells you he doesn't want to give long-term contracts to guys in his 30s. So I am really excited about Pete coming back, but I think I'm being clear. I'm under no illusions that this is a marriage. This is a 1 year, let's go. Hopefully he has a monster year. Hopefully the Mets have great success. Hopefully he adds to his Met legacy. But the odds are this is a 1 year and see you later deal with Pete Alonso.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm feeling something very similar where it's like I'm happy he's back, but I'm like I got this like weird fog over me right now. Like maybe it's a Pete Alonso fatigue, but it's nothing that I'm like, this is what was supposed to happen. He was supposed to be here this year. I'm not like latched on to Juan Soto. He's here forever. You know what I mean? So, and the other thing too is you've made a point of saying like, there's all these options. What if somebody else comes around? All this other stuff, dude. Listen, we've talked about Vlad Guerrero this offseason. He is available next offseason. That's what everyone's been talking about. So it's kind of like I could almost trade that and say, if I know I got Pete Alonso this year, I'm not worried about next year because we'll figure that out next year and we have other options. Yeah. Plus, let me just say one thing because I'm sick and tired of it with Pete Alonso. There's one thing that people bash about his age. Oh, he's 30 years old, blah, blah, blah. They've been, I was talking to somebody on the air. They said like when he was, if you give him a 3 or 4 year deal, he's going to be done with his contract at 35 years old. Dude, the guy just turned 30 in December. He hasn't officially taken a bat in his 30s yet. He is a young 30. He is a fresh 30 years old. So even if he did sign a 3-year deal, he's going to be 32, 33 years old going to free agency. It's like, hello, the guy is still in the young side of 30s. Let's not age the guy out.
It's not necessarily about his age. It's the fact that his numbers have declined over the last 3 years. That's what it's about. Now, what's beautiful is that Pete Alonso can change that this year. I mean, reverse the trend. Look, if the trend continues and his OPS drops below 788, and let's say his power stays relatively the same and his average is relatively the same, but his slugging goes down or his on base goes down, then it'll be 4 straight years. I mean, that's what it's about more than it is age. But I look at it this way. Even if Pete Alonso gives them similar production to a year ago, that is still likely better than the production they were going to get from anyone who is replacing him. And so it's a great thing he's back. Now, we do have a lot of emails, a lot of people very excited or maybe upset. I don't know. I haven't read these emails yet. I raced home from a Nets-Wizards game. So these are emails I'm reading for the first time. Pete's going to love the first email I saw from Salvatore. Salvatore writes, we demand an apology from Joe Beningo and Pete Hoffman for saying David Stearns doesn't want Pete Alonso. Now, obviously, Joe is not here. We may pop Joe on tomorrow on Evan and Tiki, but for you, Pete, would you like to take this time to apologize to David Stearns? You have claimed numerous times he didn't want Pete Alonso back.
No, I think that Steve Cohen wanted Pete Alonso back and was the one who basically told him to move a little bit more money to get this deal done. So, no, I'm not going to apologize.
What have I told you from the beginning? They want him back at their price. Now, 30 seems a little bit higher than maybe what they envision their price to be, but they got him on a short-term deal. They broke him off the long-term contract. So David Stearns didn't want him back. You think David Stearns is kicking and crying right now? Like, damn, I didn't want him back. He wanted him back. He just probably looked at it and said, I'd rather give him a short-term contract. I'd rather not pay him more money than I have to.
I know, but here's the one thing, and you said it before, too, about he's going to break Darryl Strawberry's record. And I know that might not
Yes.
mean a lot to many other people, but you want to know something who that does mean something to? Like me and other Mets fans, because that doesn't happen often. We barely have any freaking records. They're talking about history. We talked about retiring jerseys. So the fact is, this year is going to be a special year for Pete Alonso. He's going to hit 27 plus home runs guaranteed, and he's going to break the record. It means something. So yeah,
let's knock on wood when you say that, okay? Let's knock on the wood a little bit. Just knock on.
I got some wood everywhere. But the point is that is special. Like, that's got to be worth a little something, no? So hopefully they bend a little bit.
All right, so here's a negative Pete Alonso email. This is Dan. Now, I used to call Dan Negative Dan. He's actually been mostly positive during the offseason. But Dan writes, this is a big one. He's going to write a lot about basically Pete Alonso and how much he hates him. So just be prepared for this. For everyone who's consuming the Rico in a happy mood, Dan may make you, he may change your mood. I don't know. Are we really expecting a different Pete? So we're really doing this again? The exact scenario that this guy crumbled under the pressure of last year, we're just going to run it right back and expect a different result. If he couldn't handle the burden of a contract year, what makes you think this situation is going to be more conducive for him to be any better? He just got embarrassed during free agency and had to go crawling back on his hands and knees to the team that he rejected multiple offers from because literally nobody else wanted him. So if you thought he was pressing last year, just wait until he's trying to make up for what he just did to himself, plus going for an opt-out so he can try and save face. I'd say that pressure is way more than just a normal contract year. All I see when I picture him this season is even more of his patented strikeouts where he isn't within 10 feet of the pitch, constant double plays, and 1,000 runners left in scoring position. And then we're in a spot where he opts back in and we aren't able to move on from him until 2027, which is a nightmare. I was really in favor of giving the young guys a shot to see what you had, but instead we're going to once again be the oldest team in baseball and taking the route of the 22 Giants by running back the same exact overachieving team from a year ago that caught lightning in a bottle and expecting that just plopping in Juan Soto is going to be what puts them over the top. I didn't think Stearns was a really a run it back type of guy, and now I can already see what is written on the tombstone of this season. And he actually included a tombstone. 2025 Mets. And Alonso goes down on strikes to end the inning, stranding Lindor and Soto in scoring position. Dan, first of all, I don't want to laugh too much because I certainly don't want you to be right. I don't want to be sitting here in the middle of September saying, boy, that Dan really nailed it. But there's a lot of things I disagree with. The idea that they're running it back when they added one of the most dynamic hitters in baseball to that lineup, that is not running it back. That's not even close to running it back. You use the 2022 New York Giants as an example, and I know I shouldn't do this, but that's like saying, we're running it back with the 2022 New York Giants. The only change we made is we added Patrick Mahomes. What? I mean, what, are we serious? They added Juan Soto. They added Juan Soto to this lineup. Forget the pitching for a second because it's completely different. And I would certainly say they didn't run it back. They changed a lot. I mean, they said no to Severino. They said no to Quintana. They brought in Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes, and we can certainly debate if that's better or not. They obviously added A.J. Minter in the bullpen. So they did not run it back when it comes to pitching, whether you like it or you don't like it. They added Juan Soto. That's what they did. So I had concerns coming into this offseason, which I expressed, wow, are you going to be able to replicate some of your performances? Like, is Mark Vientos going to have another great year? Is he going to, I know he's not a sophomore, but will he face some kind of sophomore jinx or junior jinx technically because he's not a sophomore? Is Francisco Lindor, as great as he he going to have another MVP season? All fair, by the way. Fair question to have. They alleviate those questions because while bringing a lot of guys back, they added Juan Soto. They took Starling Marte, who was relied upon to be an everyday right fielder last year, even though he couldn't move in the outfield and is always hurt, and are now telling him, hey, you're a part-time player. You're a DH. What a perfect scenario for him. Like, I think Starling Marte is going to have a really good year. So I get the whole, I don't believe he's going to have a big year, the pressure. But saying they're running it back and dismissing the addition of Juan Soto, to me, is not fair at all. As far as Pete's concerned, I have a level of confidence, and I'll make this bet with Dan. I'll make this bet with any Met fan, and I know it's tough because what metric are we going to use? Pete Alonso will have a better year in 2025 than he did in 2024. When he hit that home run against Milwaukee, that saved the Mets season. Remember that one? That tiny little home run. A tiny home run that saved the Mets season. He became relaxed afterwards. You could see it. What happened in that next round against Philadelphia? He was a different player. So maybe I'm being naive. I don't think the pressure is going to get to him. Is he pissed about the way the offseason transpired? Probably. I'll be intrigued to see how he handles that press conference down in Port St. Lucie, Florida. I'll be intrigued how he handles me and Pete. Because I can tell you right now, and by Pete, I mean Hoff, when we go to spring training, I had a nice conversation with Alonso last year in front of his locker concerning my beard. We're going to have another conversation. And you'll be there, Hoff. And you'll get to read his body language, how he feels. I'm sure he'll say thank you to me for all the support I've showed him. I could see him be like, did you really cut the beard? But I don't think when we speak to him, may not be live on the podcast because they're very difficult with getting guys live, but we'll talk to him and we'll let you know how it goes. I doubt he's going to be pissed anymore. Is he pissed today? Maybe. Will he show his kind of, I don't want to say his anger at the process or anger at Steve Cohen when he meets the media for the first time? Maybe he will. Maybe he'll be honest and say, look, I don't like the way this thing transpired. But I think when you get to the start of the season, which is like a month and a half later, I mean, think about it. It's February 5th. Opening day is in more than a month and a half. It is a long time from now. The idea that he's going to be pissed about his contract at the start of the season, I think is ridiculous. I really do. The pressure thing, it's impossible to define. So Dan can say that. You can say, anyone can say that. There's no way to prove it. I just have a confidence that being in a better lineup, being relaxed after that breakthrough in the postseason, I think he's going to have a good year. I'm not going to tell you it's a career year. I wouldn't bet that. I think he will have a better year. So I don't know what metric you want to use. You want to go with OPS. He will have his OPS will be higher than the last two seasons. Last year was 788. The year before that was 821. I would take the over on OPS. And if he's over 821 and he's playing every day like he's done his entire Met career, I think we will be very happy. And that would be a victory for me in this little bet I'm making with Dan and anyone else who wants to take it.
I think when we go down to Florida, I think I have a perfect idea of what to do with that hair that you shaved off. You got to hand it right to Pete in a bag and say, it's yours. Do what you want. Because he made you suffer through that. He made us all suffer through that with this sole negotiation contract. So let him keep it. Maybe he'll do something special with it. But listen, I think you're right. I think he will have a bounce back season. I think last year he was pressuring himself. And we talked about this on a recent podcast too. Like, I just think that he couldn't find the groove, and he finally found it. And I said it was the worst place because it was the end of the season. It was great for playoffs, but again, it was the fans didn't get to appreciate that and realize he's still that good of a player.
The thing I really believe Pete's going to benefit from, and we'll do a deep dive on this coming up, is that throughout his Met career, he's never had great protection. It's been awful. It really has. It's almost been, I don't want to say historically bad, but it would almost blow your mind when you think about the different players that protected him. And for those out there that don't believe in protection, they don't think it really matters, I just disagree with you. I know there's not a metric to define it, but Juan Soto benefited from being protected by Aaron Judge. That's a reality. And I think that last year, you could see that if you watch the Yankees every day. He benefited from it. It doesn't mean he sucks. It doesn't mean he's going to come here and it's going to be a disaster. It just means you benefit when you have good players behind you. Pete has not had a lot of good players behind him over the course of his Met tenure. And we'll argue or discuss how you want to line this up. but no matter how you dice it, he's going to get good protection. It could be Brandon Nimmo. It could be Juan Soto. It could be Mark Vientos. But there will be good hitters protecting Pete Alonso. And I think that is a part of why I think he's going to have success. Now, Jose wants an apology from me and from you, Hoff. He writes,
me again.
Line, excuse me.
Why do I have to apologize to people? What I do?
You know what? Since he wants one from me, I'll take care of it if it's worthy. But I haven't read the email yet, so I'll let you know. We're going to find out together. Jose writes, Evan and Pete were wrong. Guys, you both need to eat crow when it comes to Pete Alonso. The market showed he's not the star you both claimed he is. Pete had to accept a deal he didn't want. Pete also took the shorter of two offers on the table, which shows the Mets are not a priority. All he wants is a big payday, and that's okay. At the end of the day, Alonso was and is the issue when it comes to a long-term relationship with the New York Mets. Players claim they want security, and Pete passed on an extra year of security because he feels he's a better player than he really is. Where I'll admit I'm wrong, Jose, was at the beginning of last season, because this really goes back to last year's, before the season even started. I was screaming and yelling, the Mets have to extend Pete Alonso. Absolutely. It's why I grew my beard out. I wanted the Mets to extend Alonso. Now, at this moment, at that time, we did not know that they tried. In my defense, we didn't know there was an offer. That had not been reported yet. Would that have changed everything? Maybe a little bit. I probably would have looked at that offer and said, hey, it's a fair offer. All right, this guy wants to get to free agency. It is what it is. So we didn't know that at the time. But yes, I wanted to re-sign Pete, and I threw out numbers like 6 years, $180 million. Absolutely. So was I wrong going back to a year ago? Yes. He got nowhere near that. I mean, he did $30 million a year, but it's only 1 year. He got nowhere near that. And so absolutely, and I've admitted that since, I was wrong. But if you go back to June, and I'll expose this on Evan and Tiki, I made everybody in the middle of June predict Alonso's contract. I like doing that on the air sometimes, like long-term predictions. I find it fun. And we're going to get a payoff on Evan and Tiki on that long-term prediction. I remember what I said. I don't know if I'll tell you right now, but put it this way. I almost nailed it because I could tell off of the year he was having, wow, he may have to settle for a short-term deal. I wasn't fully confident about it, but he wasn't having a great year. When he got to free agency and we began doing those Ricos, I thought maybe he will get a long-term contract. I don't know. I mean, really, it's the market. It's the marketplace. And Jose, to your point, he didn't get it. So if you want me to say I was wrong based on what I wanted to give him a year ago, I was wrong. I mean, there it is. I'll give it to you. I was absolutely wrong. But things change. And one of the reasons I wanted to give Pete that contract, I said, look, it's like a gamble. Would you rather gamble on giving out a long-term deal that doesn't look great, he doesn't have a good year, you overpaid a little bit, or would you rather the Aaron Judge situation where the guy has a historic year, now he gets to free agency, and you risk losing him? And my attitude was, I'd probably rather get a deal done now. It could actually save you money in the long run. And in the case of the Yankees, obviously it was the opposite effect, right? Because Judge had this historic year. He gets to free agency. He was almost gone. The Yankees had to pay him a lot more. In Alonso's case, it was the opposite. So I think the market clearly showed that teams were not willing to pay Pete Alonso anywhere near where he wanted. There's no disputing that. But the Mets got him back. That's all that matters. Philip Viola writes this. He's screaming. It's all caps. And he's responding to what we're talking about right now. This email was sent 3 minutes ago. Sometimes while we're doing Ricos, I see them. And if you send it more recently, it pops up quicker. But it's right in the middle of what we're talking about. He's about to scream because it's all in caps letters, okay? So I'm going to scream for him. Philip. Pressure. What pressure? How does this deal lead to more pressure? He's the third best player. He's nowhere near the star face of the team. The opt-in allows him to save. I can't read that word. He's very upset. That's why the words didn't make sense. The opt-in allows him to have or get hurt and still have $24 million to fall back on an opt-in. The only pressure is the expectations the team has to win. If you don't want the pressure, you shouldn't play professional sports. Sorry for all the caps, but this pressure talk is killing me. I agree with you. I think it's stupid. I agree. I think it's dumb. I think him having a bad year being simplified into pressure is dumb. And, we had a similar discussion about Aaron Judge on the air today about why has he struggled in the playoffs? Like it's kind of a basic why. In one theory, I know Tommy Lugauer had positive Tommy was he faces better pitching. That was his reason. The other reason is, well, he's pressing. It's pressure. I don't know why Aaron Judge has struggled in the playoffs. You could surmise it's putting pressure on himself. You could surmise it's better pitch. I don't know. Sometimes there's no great answer. Sometimes a guy just struggles. A-Rod struggled for 5 freaking years in a row in the playoffs, and then he became God. Same thing with Barry Bonds. Sometimes you can't explain it. So Pete Alonso had a year last year in which he wasn't overly clutch. We try to explain it with pressure. He's old. Who knows what it was? I don't know. All I know is he's back for another year, and we're going to find out. By the way, one of the cool things about Pete coming back, I got about 8 Ricos that are branching off from this. I'll give you one that we're going to do in a few days. Pete Hoffman is so excited about this. For those that are a loyal Rico listener, you may remember back in the middle of the season, I think it was during the All-Star break, we did a Rico in which we examined every home run Pete Alonso hit to determine if it was a pressure home run, a who gives a crap home run, or somewhere in the middle. Do you remember that exercise?
Yeah, it was great. We found out it was more, I feel it was more pressure to, mid type of thing.
It was in the middle. Well, we're going to include his second half home runs. We're going to include his playoff home runs, and we're going to do a whole examination on Pete Alonso's pressured year of 2024. Maybe we'll learn something from it. Maybe his season was more clutch than we realize, or maybe it was actually less clutch than we realize. So we'll be doing that. We'll also get into this lineup now that it's all set. Because look, the Met offseason is done, which I'm very happy about. There was something I was a little melancholy about, knowing spring training's a week away and knowing we had so many questions. That it's over. Like, there may be a minor league invite or something, but the bullpen moves are done. I don't think they're making a big trade for a starting pitcher. I guess that could happen, but I doubt it. And maybe it happens more during the season, especially around the trade deadline. And obviously the lineup is set. So I think we do need to say that it is basically official. Jose Iglesias is not coming back. That's not happening. I think Pete coming back has pretty much secured that. I've made peace with Iglesias coming back because the more I thought about it, especially with the way the roster stands, McNeil is here, Alonso's here. Like, I say McNeil because I thought they were going to trade him early in the offseason, so that could have changed things a little bit. But knowing this core is back, wanting Iglesias back would literally only be because of the music. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it would be because of his skills. The Mets have a lot of young players who fit his skills. And I'm not talking about Nick Madrigal as much as I'm talking about Luis Angel Acuna or even Jet Williams if he performs at the minor league level. So I think Iglesias is expendable. He also had a career year last year. I think it's very unlikely wherever he ends up with, he's going to put up those numbers. So forget about what he's asking for, which I've heard is Boris-like. That's not a surprise. Even if it wasn't that, I think we have to kind of just say, you know what? Thank you. You were OMG. It was an OMG year, but the 2025 Mets need to be different. Okay, there needs to be something different. Maybe it's not a slogan. Maybe it's not a cartoon character. Maybe it's Juan Soto mashing the effing baseball all over the ballpark. Maybe that's what it is. So I'm at peace with it, but I think we need to understand it's over. This is our team. Let's effing go. LFGM. Pete Alonso's back. What up? So let me again, I want to thank the Brooklyn Nets for playing a basketball game that I went to, because somehow that always leads to Met stuff. So thank you to Brooklyn. Thank you to the Washington Wizards for helping get the tank back on session. But more importantly, thank you to Steve Cohen for getting it done. And thank you, Pete Alonso. You're a Met for at least one more year. We got a lot of Ricos coming up over the next few days, so be ready, I guess, wherever you download and subscribe. We'll have a Big Evan and Tiki program on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Obviously, Hoff will be with BT and Sal. Are you back with BT and Sal to celebrate this momentous day?
Yeah, I've actually planned it out that I'm now healthy enough to go in tomorrow and be there to celebrate Pete Alonso returning. So
good.
Let's go.
You got to have somebody excited about Pete Alonso coming back.
Yes.
Now, in fairness, I think I heard BT say he wanted Pete Alonso back. So I know he's not a Met fan, and he's been tough on Pete at times, but I think he was rational in saying, hey, you're better off with him back. So good.
Thanks to the Yankee fan on the show to come to that conclusion.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you very much for listening, subscribing, and downloading a very happy Pete Alonso is back, bitches edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.